Jaren Jackson Jr. has had a big summer already, and later on in the month of August, he's going to be overseas representing Team USA in the FIBA World Cup. But we wanted to take a moment here on this final day of July and really just dream a big dream, you dreamers out there, thinking about what Jaren Jackson can be as he opens the Memphis Grizzlies season as the best player on the active roster, keyword being active. We're going to talk about that and more on this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Hopefully you had a wonderful weekend, a safe weekend, a cool weekend. Hopefully you found some air conditioning or a big storm came and knocked the humidity out. It's been a hot one across the United States over the last few days. Hopefully you found some relief, and hopefully you're getting some relief to the start of your work week with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts. I write over at Bluff City Media, and I also do some contributions toward SB Nation from time to time. I'm joined by my co-host, DeMichael Cole, the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. DeMichael, hopefully you're one of those folks that's been able to find some relief from the heat.
I would like to think so, but man, Joe, look, I had so many plans this weekend, and even Saturday I got out a little bit, but you may know the answer better than me, but like, what is it about the sun? And I've lived in Memphis my whole life. I've never figured it out. Where like it just like physically drains you.
Yeah.
And like when I come back in the house, like at 3, 4 o'clock, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got a full day ahead. And then I smack my bed, and it's like I'm done for the day. Like this Memphis sun has just drained me. Sunday I said I don't want no smoke with the sun. John Morant said he isn't ducking the smoke. I'm ducking all the smoke from the sun.
And if it's hot enough, the sun is making smoke, right? All sorts of wildfires that smoke gets blown down from Canada. And I know, you scientists out there, relax. It's more than just that. Cool out, okay? I think that the bottom line here to Michael, obviously we're in the dog days of the NBA offseason. Maybe we can all just agree that summer is the worst season. I mean, it's pretty trash, in my opinion. I'm not a fan. I say that as a
Southern boy. I will say it's not the worst. I don't like winter.
See, I'm a winter guy. Bring on the winter, bring on the fall.
But I'm a look good, feel good guy, and I don't look good in the winter. I just throw in a hoodie and I say forget it. And the summer,
winter is the big guy's time to shine.
That's your time. Yeah, that's your time.
My time. It's my time to be the good looking one in the big puffy sweater. Thank you to all who check out Locked On Grizzlies, not just for our season takes and our fashion advice, but for our Memphis Grizzlies content. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out over on YouTube as well. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, as we are available as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team almost every day. Locked On is very kind to its hosts in the off season. You'll see a little bit less of us. We're still going to try to be pretty consistent with our shows, but every once in a while I have a feeling DeMichael and I say, we'll get it tomorrow. So that's the general vibe. Check in, stay subscribed. Maybe not every day, but we'll try to stick around as best we can as the off-season grinds along the next couple of months. And then October or September will be around, and before you know it, we'll be right back on the grind. Especially once FIBA gets started, we'll have a lot to talk about when it comes to Memphis Grizzlies stuff. But today, speaking of FIBA, Jaren Jackson Jr. was in the news. He was part of a post over at the Commercial Appeal that you didn't write, partner, but it was a wonderful piece, a news kind of piece, checking in on Jaren as he was running a camp there for, I believe Jaren does an all-female camp, which is really cool, helping build the game on the female side of things. He did his first co-ed camp. And the article also touched on Jaren's, thoughts on roster changes, John Morant suspension. But the thing that stood out to me, and it's what I wrote about for over at Bluff City Media today, the idea of dreaming about what Jaren Jackson Jr. could be. I've written in the past about his leadership, how he's so vital for the Memphis Grizzlies in that way. But I alluded to it, partner, early on in the show. Jaren Jackson Jr., I don't know if it's that controversial of a take. again, if the key word is active, Jaren Jackson Jr. is the best active member of the Memphis Grizzlies right now. John Morant is suspended. He's not with the team. He won't be with the team until December, if not later than that, depending on how the suspension goes. So Jaren Jackson Jr. ascending to this role, knowing that he's going to be in that spot from the beginning, I'm excited to see how he takes that on, given all, the sportsmanship awards that he's been nominated for, all the various things he's done in the Memphis community and elsewhere. He's a very interesting cat in the fact that he's going to be the face of the Grizzlies to start a large, sizable portion of the NBA season. I was just kind of taken aback reading that article thinking, oh yeah, this is Jaren's team, at least for now.
Yeah. And I agree with you in some ways there, but I am a little bit hesitant to just give all of the keys to Jaren at this point because, most people know I'm a big believer in Dez. And
sure.
Here's the difference I would say between those two right now. I think what you're hitting on, partner, is the fact that he's the most talented player that you have right now.
Absolutely.
With John Morant, being suspended 25 games.
Well, like we'll talk about later on in the show, we're talking ceiling. Exactly. I don't think anybody would say that Desmond Bane has a higher ceiling than Jaren Jackson Jr.
For sure. And that's why I was going to say that part. More touching on the court production. I think Desmond Bane is above him from an offensive standpoint, and then what he does with the 3-point shooting. You can make an argument that he kind of changes the games, on offense, maybe as much as Jaren affects the defense, because again, the Grizzlies are not a good 3-point shooting team. You take Desmond Bane off the floor, teams are just going to stay in the paint and say, come to us, because they don't have much to guard at the 3-point line. But getting back to your point, we shouldn't even be having this conversation. It shouldn't even be a conversation because Jaren Jackson Jr. can be that good. That's why I had to throw that Dez part in there. And I know some people are like, oh, Mike, what are you talking about? But I had to throw that in there to lead to what probably most people wanted me to say from the jump. It's the fact that, yes, right now we're having this Jaren, Dez, me and you've had the convo before. It's a debate. It's a topic. But eventually it shouldn't be. And we'll get to more of that later on. But this is a big summer, I think, for Jaren. You touched on it from the FIBA perspective. Just talking to those guys earlier this summer, Steve Kerr, Grant Hill. Sounds like Jaren's going to be playing a lot of 5 there. I know that's something Joe Mullinax for years has been kind of hinting at happening. So we're going to see a little dose of that. And we're going to see the all-around game put on display. FIBA is a lot more about, putting those bigs in playmaking situations. What have we talked about, Joe, is probably the number one area of needed improvement for Jaren Jackson Jr. This is a huge summer for him. And remember, last summer was a huge summer for Jaren Jackson Jr. And then, boom, he fractured his foot. So that summer kind of went by his waist, and he still had his most productive NBA season to date. So now you give him a full summer. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about what this guy can put together.
The international play is just gigantic. You alluded to it there. And as I wrote about, and as you and I have talked about before here on Locked On Grizzlies, the reality is a lot of times Team USA in the past has, reverted to isolation basketball for a couple of reasons. As you mentioned on a prior episode, the team's not together as much as international squads are. Even ones with NBA players, they usually play together more than the United States players do for a variety of reasons. So isolation ball makes sense in those ways. And then another reason, which is a little more obvious, the United States of America just tends to have better athletes that play basketball better than the rest of the world. So if you have, obviously not this coming FIBA tournament, but we'll use Brandon Ingram because he will be playing in the tournament. Yep. If you have Brandon Ingram and he's being defended by a 6'5" guy who plays EuroLeague basketball, Brandon Ingram probably should just, at 6'10", try to shoot the basketball over the guy, right? Makes some sense. But I do think that with new management, you mentioned Steve Kerr, Grant Hill, I foresee them using this younger group, because again, this isn't a true, best of the best USA, right? Jaren maybe would make that cut just because of the FIBA international rules when it comes to blocks. But I do think it's a chance for him to grow his game. We'll talk more about that here next on Locked On Grizzlies. I think his ceiling is even higher than perhaps we've talked about before. And the reason why I think is pretty again, we've talked about it here on the show, but I really want to drive home the idea of how his international play will help with that and how him getting better at that particular instance, that particular thing, will make the Grizzlies that much better. We're going to cover that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, an official special partner, of Major League Baseball. Make sure that you are taking the time to take your first swing at betting MLB over at FanDuel. Get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose, that's $200 that you can spend betting everything from money lines to over-unders, who you think is going to get the first home run. That's all on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly if you'd like. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today, give FanDuel.com/locked-on a shot to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Again, FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. We are talking an area that we've discussed in the past here on Locked On Grizzlies, but we're really going to dive in deep to Jaren Jackson Jr., the playmaker, next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, DeMichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at DeMichaelC. Follow me on Twitter at Joe Mullinax. I am of Bluff City Media. I'm the Memphis Grizzlies columnist over there. And I have a piece up live at Bluff City Media. Maybe not right this moment, depending on when you're listening or watching, but on Monday it's going live. Hopefully you'll check it out. It talks about my dreams of Jaren Jackson Jr. and this one thing, the playmaking aspect, which we talked about just last week to Michael, how playmaking is an area, not just for Jaren, but for the entire team to grow. The reason we're really going to dive in on Jaren with this particular topic is, to me, it's the thing that he needs to get better at the fastest. It's the thing where he has the most drastic room for growth. Check out these numbers from Cleaning the Glass, DeMichael. This past season, Jaren had a 4.8% assist percentage. 4.8%. That's the worst of his career. He has steadily declined throughout his career. His rookie season was his best year in terms of assist percentage. 4.8 was the worst, and then his assist to usage ratio was 0.22. Now, that number may mean nothing to you. Just know that, and I love that Cleaning the Glass does this, that puts him in the second percentile, not in the entire NBA, DeMichael, among NBA bigs. So that means that there is 98% more bigs in the National Basketball Association that create compared to their usage rate. And Jaren had a pretty high usage rate, not the highest of his career, but a pretty substantial one this past season, 22.1%. That was 90th percentile among bigs. That second percentile assist to usage rate, that tells you, and if you watch the Lakers series, you mentioned it last week, the Lakers knew it. Jaren Jackson Jr. gets the ball. He starts his drive to the basket. It's highly unlikely he's going to pass. Now, in my article, I use an example of Jaren passing to Luke Kennard out of a double team. I think it was from game 2 in the series, and Kennard hits an open 3. The Lakers vary who brings the double, right? They bring different guys from different parts of the floor. More than one pass away, it would have to be a skip pass to the other side of the floor. Jaren's not able to find those guys, or they time it a little bit differently so that he's not able to get out of his routine or his move fast enough to find the open player coming off of the double team. So for a variety of reasons, Jaren is just not very good at this. It's never really been a focus of his game. And because if he just gets to below average, because right now he's awful statistically.
just below average, Joe.
Below average. But in terms of this coming season, think about how much, obviously FIBA can help with that, but going Grizzlies specific, think about how much that will help the half-court offense. If you have a 6'11" guy who is going to be the focal point of opposing defenses, because you're right, Desmond Bane definitely is a more versatile scorer than Jaren Jackson Jr. is, but Jaren just has so much more potential to do stuff with the ball in his hand in terms of finishing at the rim in particular. They're going to collapse on him. And if he can, again, just below average, that 30th, 40th percentile, finding guys out on the perimeter like a Luke Kennard, a Marcus Smart, that's going to help the half-court offense tremendously. We know Desmond Bane is going to be able to do that. Whether or not Jaren Jackson Jr. can, that seems like an area for the most rapid growth for this Grizzlies offense.
Yeah, and Joe, in the simplest form, we talk about his playmaking numbers, he's never averaged more assists than turnovers in the season. Every season he's played, he's finished with more turnovers than assists.
That's NBA. Bad.
It's got to change. You set the bar below average. I'm going to challenge him to be even better than that. He's too good. He can be at least an average playmaker. Look at all these other bigs in the NBA who we consider elite. All those guys are pretty much at least average. I mean, I'm not even talking about the Jokic level, but I'm talking about the Bam Adebayos, the Domantas Sabonis, the guys who, if you draw doubles, you're going to pay. That's the name of the game. You simplify the game. And the Grizzlies have a big man in Jaren who the Warriors last season in the playoffs said they were having trouble guarding him one-on-one. Was it game one against the Lakers when Jaren had the big game? It was game one right off the bat, right? Or it was early in the series. I believe it was game one. But Jaren had the big game in game one, and he never replicated, he never duplicated that success for the rest of the series. And you mentioned it. They started throwing the doubles at him. Yes, they threw different types of doubles and all that. But Jaren has so many ways he can attack. He can triple threat you and just go off the dribble. He can go back to the basket. He can face up in the mid post. He has all of these different ways he can get to his spots. He showed us the strength this past season. Now, and not only did he show us the strength, he showed us the finishing ability. Now it's putting it all together, because the other part of that is the fouls. We always talk about the fouls from a defensive standpoint, but I mean, this guy generates a lot of offensive fouls as well. There are a lot of charges and things like that simply from being out of control when he's in those situations. So it's pace, it's timing, it's accuracy, and it's something that I think he can improve on. And after this past season where he was as forceful as many people wanted to see him, because remember, at first it was 1-2 games. He looks like this big forceful guy where he's abusing mismatches. And then the next game, he shoots 8 3-pointers and 5 2-pointers. And it's like, what the world? But now, this past season, he showed us this was the first year where he looked like, hey, man, these dudes can't guard me. But now, okay, yeah, they can't guard you one-on-one. So what are you going to do when they throw the doubles at you? He should be averaging over 2 assists per game next season. That's the jump I'm expecting.
And that would be realistic again. And that would put him in that below average to average territory. He's just been so bad at it that it's hard to say, for me at least, it's hard for me to say, go be average. You're going from being abysmal to being better, right? But again, I don't mean to be disrespectful. He does so many other things so well. And that leads me to the final point here on this part of the show, DeMichael. It sounds like I'm down on Jaren. I'm really not. It makes me excited, because to me, it makes his ceiling even higher, realizing how he has gotten worse in this particular area. You mentioned the turnovers on offensive fouls. That counts as a turnover. He turned the ball over. They lost that possession. So if he can clean this specific area of his game up, he's already a top 30 or so player of the NBA with these holes in his game. We'll talk about bold predictions later on in the show. I think he could be a top 15 player in the National Basketball Association if he gets to that average level that you just mentioned. Because like I said, he's top 30 right now, and he's really bad at this.
Yeah, and that just goes to show, this is such a glaring weakness in his game. And it's because it's one of those things where for a player at his position, it's not really the biggest of priorities. You don't need him. The Grizzlies don't need him to be a elite playmaker, because you got John, you got Niz. They don't need him to be
now
Jokic.
You have Marcus Smart.
And now you have Marcus Smart. You don't need him to be Jokic. You don't need him to be Bam, operating at the top of the key. You don't need him to be Sabonis. You need him to be Miles Turner or something. That's all you're asking for. Just someone who, when the doubles come, like Joel Embiid is good at it. He gets tunnel vision sometimes too, but he knows how to attack double teams, and that's all you're asking at this point. A lot of attention gets put on the fouls, right? Talk about the foul trouble, the foul trouble, the foul trouble. Me and you have kind of broken it down to a T in terms of how that number is kind of unclear because of the minutes that the Grizzlies players play. It's already lower than most of the starters in the NBA. But you take that out because of that. I think playmaking is probably the most glaring weakness in his game at this point. But it's also the area where you talk about the fouls. I don't think Jaren Jackson Jr. will ever be a guy who just doesn't really deal with foul trouble.
No.
As opposed to the playmaking, I think there's a realistic route to him being the guy eventually in his career who can give you 3.5 assists a game.
Agreed completely. And to your point, the foul percentage, last season it was or 2021, 2022, I should say, it was at 5.7, right? That was the worst it's been. It was at 4.2. Then this past season it was at 4.4. So he's gotten a lot better at that because 2 seasons prior, it was at 6.4%. And when it was at 6.4, that put him in that 6th percentile for foul percentage. Now he's below average when it comes to that foul percentage number, and he's the defensive player of the year. So again, just get to the 40th percentile. Doesn't have to be just don't be at the second anymore. Let's make some growth from that and see that assist to usage ratio go up. You're right. Joel Embiid has gotten better at this throughout his career. There's no reason Jaren Jackson Jr. can't do the same thing. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to make some bold Jaren Jackson predictions. I just killed the lead a little bit a moment ago. I'm going to make my bold Jaren Jackson prediction first, and then I'll let DeMichael yell at me for it when we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts. I am of Bluff City Media, also a contributor over at SB Nation, joined by my co-host, DeMichael Cole, with the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. You've come to the right place, and hopefully you'll stick with us as we enter the month of August. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we'll be a little bit more sporadic in our posting. We're going to do our best to give at least 3 or 4 episodes a week. But again, there's only so much you can discuss this time of year when it comes to NBA basketball. DeMichael and I will be around, but hopefully you understand just a little bit less than perhaps we normally have been. Stick with us, subscribe. We'll be in your feeds, I promise. Time for my bold prediction that you're going to yell at me about. Because I think it's kind of crazy. There's probably a lack of logic in a way, because I'm sure we live in a world where Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid exist, right? So there's really only one spot where Jaren Jackson Jr. would fit this, and I don't know that he's going to play the position enough to get there. So I want to stress that he's probably not.
Everyone prepare yourselves.
Well, I'm just trying to make it make as much sense as possible. So here I go. Jaren Jackson Jr. may not be named to the All-NBA. Oh, no, but it's positionless now. I just reminded myself.
It's positionless.
Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to make the 3rd team All-NBA team. That is my bold prediction. He is going to be an All-NBA player this coming season. Reminded myself in the middle of my hot take that it's not as hot anymore because he's going to be recognized as one of the 15 best players in the NBA by being on the All-NBA roster. How crazy is that, DeMichael? Tell me how wrong I am.
I don't think it's too crazy, actually. I just think about, the wing position is so loaded in the NBA.
And that's where they're going to make up for some stuff.
But there's the 65-game minimum now. And Jaren, quite frankly, if you take away the offseason injury, if you go through the last 2 seasons, he's been the healthiest Grizzlies player.
Right.
The past 2 seasons. I mean, he hasn't missed much time. He missed the first few games of this past season recovering from the offseason injury. So nothing as of late tells me that this isn't a guy who won't qualify for the 65 games, because that's the only mark. But I think of guys like Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, who might struggle to meet that 65-game criteria.
And probably don't care much anymore about all NBA stuff because it wouldn't connect to their contract anyway.
And could care less. So I don't think that's as bold. Honestly, you want to know what I thought you were going to say? I thought you were going to say he'll be an All-Star Game starter. I thought you were going to go off the rails. Which again, that one, the fan voting and things like that that probably hurt him. Right. But I may agree with you. I'm gonna have to crunch the names. We'll come back to this because I'm gonna crunch the names. We're gonna have to figure out who I think will play 65, because with the guards, it'll be a lot of guys. You know, they're gonna a lot of those guards will qualify, but it's those older forwards who. But I think that's a fair thing to say, especially I think statistically speaking, Jaren is going to get a nice boost from those first 25 games. Like I think a lot of people don't remember this, but before Desmond Bane got hurt, he was averaging like 25, 5 and 5 before the toe injury. And that start to his season kind of gave him a little stat boost, gave him a little room for error, where he still ended the season averaging like 21, 5 and 4. But his numbers were even better than that before the injury. And I think Jaren, statistically speaking, of course, when Ja comes back, his offensive usage will go down a little bit and his points per games will go down. But my bold prediction is pretty much going to be on brand with what I've said earlier. I think Jaren Jackson Jr., I won't go too off the wall here. I'll say that this is the first season in the NBA career that he averages more assists than turnovers. And that's it. If I wanted to, some people say, "Oh, give us a concrete number." I'll say 2.3 assists. Like he's 1.7 is his career high. And Steven Adams comes back. Let's be real. Steven Adams is going to have the ball in more playmaking situations when you talk about dribble handoffs and just the big man working the sets through those bigs because of his screen setting ability and things like that. Where Jaren Jackson Jr. will be able to create for others will be when he's got the ball in his hand himself. I think early on in the season, and no exaggeration here, I think before Ja gets back, he should be averaging at least 3.5 assists in that 25-game span. If he's not averaging over 3 assists in that span, then you should probably be worried a little bit because there's going to be a lot of playmaking to go around. And I think as Ja comes back, he'll have to, find his way from the perspective of when Ja's out of the game, you got to be more of a playmaker for others and things like that, as opposed to when Ja's in the game. It's going to go through Ja more. You're spotting up, doing a little bit more shooting, taking advantage of mismatches. Pretty much what we've seen up to this point between those two. But I think this is the first season where we can see Jaren Jackson Jr. Eclipse from an assist-to-turnover ratio standpoint. It can be a positive for him because last season was the gauntlet for him. This was the first year teams made it obvious, look, we got to double Jaren Jackson Jr. I covered the team a couple seasons ago, and I didn't hear, people would say it maybe for a quarter or two. Oh, he gets hot, yeah, double him third quarter, double him fourth quarter. But going into a game plan, like the Warriors were saying, we got to throw bodies at him. Like the Lakers were saying, we got to throw multiple bodies at him. It's kind of the same thing with Ja Morant at guard. Remember, we talked about this in a recent episode with Ja from the standpoint of his IQ has improved so much, even though he came into the league with high IQ. But his IQ, what has helped Ja is teams have blitzed him. Mm-hmm. They've done switches. They've hedged against them. They've done hard hedges, soft hedges. He's seen so many different defensive coverages where now, no matter what you throw at him, I've seen that before. And that's where Jaren, even though he's older from an NBA career standpoint, from his offensive progression over the last 2 years, it's setting up for this to be that year where he says, I've seen that. You got Dez over here to pass to. Now you got Luke Kennard for a full season to pass the ball to as well as those other guys who should improve the three-point shooting. I'm expecting a playmaking jump this season.
I think that's a realistic one, and I think it's one that I agree with because if he's going to be one of the top 15 players in the NBA, chances are he's surpassing that number. So we're on the same page, and it's always nice when we're on the same page on Jaren Jackson Jr. Kudos to you, Jaren, for, again, being a positive light in the Grizzlies universe right now. Things will get better. Things will improve. And I think they have kind of as time has gone on. People have gotten used to the idea of having a Ja Morant-less start to the season. Mm-hmm. Having players like Jaren Jackson Jr. makes that a little bit easier to swallow. Yeah. The next time that we're here on Locked On Grizzlies, thanks to everyone who has been checking us out, an everydayer or two hopefully is out there checking us out each and every day wherever they get their podcasts, as well as over on YouTube. And again, remember, I just said the next time we are here, because that may be Tuesday, it may not be Tuesday, as we enter the month of August. But the next time we're back, partner, I listened to your Taylor Jenkins episode over the weekend.
Did you hear me name drop you? Did you hear it?
Yeah, a time or two.
Yeah.
I did. I even went back and played it again. We don't have to read. We don't have to do that.
I just want to hear what you have to say on it. That's all.
I'll provide a take. But what I really want to do is do a similar thing with Zach Kleiman. And maybe we can look at some things, because there's a King Kleiman aspect, and I've said it a time or two, praising a former executive of the year in the NBA. But that doesn't mean that he's perfect. And maybe there's some stuff that we could take a look at that he's done, or things that he could do that could put this roster in a more interesting position moving forward. So again, the next time we're here with our dear listeners and viewers on Locked On Grizzlies, let's tackle. I'll respond to your Jenkins fun stuff, but I want to tackle King Kleiman if you're down for it.
Let's do it. Let's talk about Mr. Zach Kleiman. I heard he's not too much of a fan of the King Kleiman.
Yeah,
nickname. I've heard that before, but I mean, it has a little kick to it, right? Yeah, it has a little kick to it. I remember they had the T-shirts, with the crown on and all that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's talk Zach Kleiman. I think it's a great time to talk about the GM. It's summer. He just put together another summer where he made some roster changes that, quite frankly, many people didn't expect. So yeah, let's talk about it.
And I do, if I were in a role where I was called Monarch Mullinax, which obviously doesn't sound nearly as cool. But
does Deacon DeMichael roll off the tongue the same?
I like Deacon DeMichael. I think that's pretty good. I think that's a lot better than Monarch Mullinax.
Or Crown Cole.
Well, it's more like Jester Joe over here. That would be the court joker would be me. But I've had a chance to meet Zach in the past. We had a good conversation. I was covering the game in Washington, D.C. I think it was John Morant's rookie year, and I had a chance to talk with him for 10 minutes. So I'm certainly not best buddies with him. I know you have a lot more interactions with him. I respect him. I think he's done a heck of a job building this roster, but I think it's a good time to kind of look at the current state of things and his role in that. So the next time we're together here on Locked On Grizzlies, that will be our focus. Thank you for making us part of your Grizzlies at NBA content consumption. To Michael and I appreciate it. Again, rate, comment, like, subscribe, all those things, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as over on YouTube. Thank you to our everydayers who check us out each and every time we drop a new episode. It is much appreciated. We hope you'll continue to do so as the calendar turns over to August. He's DeMichael. I'm Joe. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies.